Welcome to the Happy Homebirth Podcast, your source for positive natural childbirth stories and your community of support, education, and encouragement in all things homebirth and motherhood. What happens when the person working inside the hospital system still chooses homebirth for herself? And what does it look like when the years of witnessing birth, the beauty of it, the interventions, the emergencies, the physiology, lead someone not further from instinctive birth, but deeper into trust? Hey there, happy home birthers, and welcome to episode 330 of the Happy Home Birth Podcast. I'm your host, Caitlin Fusco, and today I'm joined by Alehson Treadwell, a labor and delivery nurse, IBCLC, and mother of three whose personal birth experiences evolved alongside her years caring for women inside of the hospital system. Let's jump in. Please remember that the opinions of my guests may not necessarily reflect my own and vice versa. And this show is not medical advice, it's an educational tool. So continue to take empowered responsibility for your health and your family. Alehson, thank you so much for coming on the Happy Home Birth Podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I am excited to have you. Would you mind taking just a moment here at the beginning to introduce yourself and your family to the listeners?
Sure. My name is Alehson Treadwell. I live in Dover, New Hampshire. I am married to my husband, Chris. We are coming up on our 7-year wedding anniversary, and I have 3 kiddos. Our oldest is almost 6, and then 3 and 8 months.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And I know that we're going to be talking some about your career and how your career ties into your birthing experiences. So, could we start there? What do you do and how long have you been doing it?
Yeah, absolutely. I am a labor and delivery nurse. It is all I've done in my career. I have been doing it for a little over 16 years now. I've done labor and delivery. I have gone back to midwifery school, which ultimately I didn't quite finish because of COVID and everything else, but I have that education. I also am now an IBCLC. So that's kind of what I do.
So, 16 years. So, you were doing that for a decade before you had your first.
Yep. Yeah.
That's very interesting. And with all of your experience as a labor and delivery nurse, I mean, I know you've seen so many births and so many different experiences. How did that impact you when you decided to become pregnant for the first time?
Yeah, it's funny because I always wanted to have a home birth, I think. Even in nursing school, I wrote my senior research paper on home births. So, early on point, I don't remember why specifically. I've just always really loved pregnancy and birth. And when I was younger, I had the chicken soup for the pregnant mother's soul that I read as a little kid.
I love you already. It's just so relatable.
So I just have always loved pregnancy. I actually didn't really know what type of nurse I wanted to be. My sister will say, I could have told you that you would have been a labor nurse. Yeah, so I wrote my senior research paper on home births. And then when my sister had her kiddos, which was her oldest is almost 14, she planned a home birth really because I think I had helped influence her in that. And she had 3 home births. So it was always my plan. And definitely, I got a little bit of pushback from being in the hospital, but also I had worked in the same hospital setting for my whole career up until when I got pregnant. And they just knew that that's what I was going to do.
That's Alehson.
Yeah, yeah, right. Yep. I was the one that took home birth transfers that came in or whatever. So, yeah, it wasn't so much of a surprise, I don't think, for anybody, but it definitely I still did a lot of things by the book my first pregnancy. I, like I said, planned a home birth. So we had our home birth midwife come but we did all the kind of standard things. We had regularly scheduled appointments. I did all the blood work and, DBS testing and all the things. And I definitely had a fair amount of anxieties, I think, just from knowing what I know. There were certain little things that stuck out in my mind that I was always a little anxious about, but then I would just kind of, I don't know, work through it and we got through okay. Granted, COVID hit when I was 20 weeks. So that kind of derailed life, obviously, for everybody. But I was also extra grateful at that time that I was planning a home birth because we got to still have our regularly scheduled care and my husband got to be there. And everything else.
Mm,
So, yeah.
yeah. I'm curious. So, 16 years ago, when you are finishing nursing school, you're already writing your paper on home birth. How did you come across home birth?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't really remember.
Mm.
I mean, at some point in there, I had watched like The Business of Being Born. I read Baby Catcher by Peggy Vincent, which
Oh, yeah.
was one of my favorite books. I've read it many times since, and her other books. And that I think is what really made me also want to become a midwife someday. But that's as much as I don't really remember beyond
Right.
that, like what sparked the idea of home birth.
That's really neat. That's
Yeah.
really cool.
My mom had all 3 of us by C-section, so, like, this was kind of a foreign concept for her and
Mhm.
everything else, but it just was, I don't know, something that resonated with me, I guess.
That's so neat.
Yeah.
So I am curious how COVID, if you were in the COVID era while you were pregnant with your first, how did that impact your job?
Yeah, so I actually was already working very minimally at my job as a labor nurse
Mm.
because I was in clinical for midwifery school. So I was doing all my clinicals leading up to COVID. So I had actually finished all my coursework, almost all my clinicals. I was getting through my births and COVID got put on hold. So I've literally done it all except for a handful of births, but that's all right.
It's
That wasn't
okay.
the right plan, I guess, for me in my life. But then once COVID hit, I just felt like we just really didn't know enough about any of it. And I didn't feel comfortable being in the hospital. And thankfully, my management was really willing to work with me. And our midwife just wrote a note and they allowed me to just be off of work. So I
Nice.
think that was good, but then it was also just more isolating in and of itself that like, of course this like thing that I had wanted my whole life to have a baby and be pregnant and celebrate with my friends and
Mm.
coworkers who were really, like family and stuff. I was very much at home, but we made the best of it. I mean, we still got out as much as we could during COVID, but I was home from 20 weeks on,
Yeah.
just kind of hanging out and waiting for a baby.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a long time to hang out and wait for a baby, but
Yeah.
especially when it's your first and you're not, chasing around others.
Right. So yeah, my birth, well, I fully expected to go to 40 weeks, and then I'd be okay going past my due date. And initially I was that first week or so. And then the next week it got a little harder. And I think that that's really what hung me up with knowing what I knew. I knew that like at 42 weeks, based on our laws and, regulations in New Hampshire, um, that I'd have to be transferred to the hospital, and I just really didn't want to have to transfer and have an induction and all this, and it just kind of kept getting closer, and so we talked about, what we would do to speed things up, and ultimately, I think a lot of that, again, I don't think my midwife necessarily would have like recommended or pushed for kind of like a home induction things as much as I did, but I really just felt like I was fearful of having to go to the hospital and be induced. So around like 41 and I think 4 or 5, we started with like membrane sweep and I was already like 4 centimeters. So like,
Oh, wow.
yeah. And then the next day, nothing happened. We did another membrane sweep. And then the next day I got to like, I think the next day I was like 5 and we did her whole like castor oil protocol, which did not do anything other than cause me some serious GI distress. But I mean, I'd had like a million Braxton Hicks my whole pregnancy anyways, and so I was like doing castor oil and then walking and then pumping and doing this whole regimen, and I was like, I don't know, I'm having like stronger Braxton Hicks, but these aren't what I would think of as like contractions. And so anyways, like the next day was like 41 and 6. I was 6 centimeters, not in labor.
Oh my word.
Yep. And then so we went for a biophysical profile, which came back a little bit iffy, but I think was more the ultrasonographer than anything. Ended up going to the hospital where I worked for an NST, and he was perfect and beautiful. And the provider there was like, like I can break your water if you want. And I was like, well, I'm GBS positive, so no. And she was like, okay, good idea. And she said, what do you want? And I said, ultimately, I'd love to go home, go into labor. Great. If not, I'll come back tomorrow for an induction.
Mm.
She was like, great, I love that. So that night we came home and I was like, I'm not going to try anything. We've tried it all. Like, but I feel like I've kind of made peace with the idea of coming back tomorrow for an induction. And granted, I hadn't been at the hospital during all of COVID and I hadn't been there through half my pregnancy. So I think I was just like feeling just anxious about what people would be thinking of me, or I don't know what. And so I think going and having the NST, realizing like things are fine here. It's okay. Like these are my people. I'm safe here. I think allowed me to kind of just like let it go. And then like wouldn't you know, that night I went into labor. So ultimately like my labor actually was pretty quick, but then when I pushed, I started pushing and I pushed and I pushed and I pushed. And I ended up pushing for 4.5 hours. And around the 4 hour mark, decided I decided to transfer because I just felt like he was not coming. So thankfully, we lived 2 seconds from the hospital. So from the time we left here to the time he was born was like less than 40 minutes. So we transferred. They knew I was coming. It was quick. It was an easy vacuum, a couple, like 2 pulls. He was asynclitic and had a nuchal arm, and he was 9'9". So all these things together, didn't make it any easier, but everything went fine. And then I hemorrhaged, of course, too, because I was 42 weeks and I'd been pushing forever with this giant baby and whatever. And then I had a third degree as well. So kind of the whole rigmarole, which,
Mhm.
ultimately like my birth was pretty great and I didn't regret transferring. I kind of felt like it was what I needed. I was really happy that I went into labor on my own and had a pretty great labor, all things considered.
Mhm.
I ended up with a blood transfusion the next day.
Mm.
But we went home the next day and like things were okay.
Yeah.
So that was
Okay.
my first.
That was your first.
Yeah.
And how did you feel postpartum after your first?
My postpartum was just actually okay. Had some initial struggles with like breastfeeding, but ultimately like was fine. He breastfed for over 3 years and we had plenty of milk and we donated milk to 1 million people and really pretty good ultimately.
Mhm.
Like even like my recovery from my third degree was not that bad and yeah, it was good.
Wow. So you had your first, and then what's the age gap between your first and second?
Yeah, they're just under 2.5 years. So we had planned like 2 years and then we got pregnant actually. They would have probably ended up with like the same birthday probably
Yeah.
and ended up having a very, very early loss with that pregnancy, which I'm very grateful it was early. I feel so much for people who have any loss, of course, but any later loss. Like we were probably like 5.5 weeks.
Mm.
So obviously that was hard, but I think that, there was grace in how early it was.
Mm.
And then ultimately, I think our age gap is great. Like, having had them at the gap that they are, I think less would have been just more challenging. So, everything does work out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, we ended up trying for a couple more months and then got pregnant and had our second in January of 23.
Okay.
So I, of course, expected to go to like 42 weeks with that one. But
Mhm.
this time I still did most of the things standard. It was like a little bit more lax, I think, with some things. I think, and this time too, I had said, like, if I went to 42 weeks, I think I would have felt more comfortable being home
Mhm.
maybe a few more days if, like, my midwife was willing to do that. I mean, I saw the chiropractor throughout. And then this time too, because I really feel like the biggest hang up for me was like his position.
Mhm.
And just sitting around during COVID didn't help that, I'm sure. And granted, I hardly had time to sit with my second because I was chasing a toddler, but I also was like determined to make sure this baby was in a better position. So I
Mm.
did a lot of like from like 34 weeks on, I didn't sit on the couch at night. I sat on the birth ball or on the floor and I did stretches and I did inversions like every single night. Again, like full well expecting to go late again. And then on my due date, I had seen the chiropractor that day. And that night I was just like, asked my husband, could you just do like, I just want to do sideline release. I really don't need you to do anything. I just need you to make sure I don't fall off the bed. Like just to, help make sure everything's good. And then like that night I was like crampier, but I like always would wake up with Braxton Hicks overnight every time I had to pee, of course, and then I'd go back to sleep. And so that night I definitely it was similar, but they felt crampier, but I didn't really think anything of it. I just figured like the morning would come and go and we'd move on with our lives. But then my husband had been sleeping upstairs with our toddler and they ended up coming downstairs. I had started my Christian hypnobirthing tracks at one point just because I really just couldn't sleep, but I didn't really feel like anything was happening.
Mhm.
My husband came downstairs and asked me to turn them off, which I was like, what are you talking about? But he just was like, what are you doing? Like, why aren't we sleeping? So, and my toddler came down too, and of course he was like, "What are you doing, mom? Are you awake? Are you sleeping? What are you doing?" So I went to go sleep on the couch, and as soon as I got up, I had contractions every like 2 minutes. And I went to the bathroom and had a little bit of bloody show, which I think was the only thing that made me feel like, oh, maybe this is actually doing something. So I downloaded a timing app and like instantly was like, you should go to the hospital, which I was like, well, don't need to do that. But I called our midwife and she heard me have like one contraction. She's like, okay, I'm on my way. Like, and I was like, I don't want to call you too early, but I don't want to call you too late. And she was like, no, I'm coming. And she lives like 30 minutes away. So, like, not that long. Within like 15 minutes, like I had called my mom and she came because my son was awake and I was like cranking through labor. My husband was in the back room inflating the birth tub. So he didn't hear any of this. He had no clue really like how hard I was working. And finally I went in to tell him, I was like, I kind of feel like I have to poop. And so I feel like this baby's coming soon. So he saw me have that contraction. And then the next contraction, we called the midwife, had her on speakerphone. The next contraction, my water broke. And then the next contraction, I was like, she's crowning and you need to catch her. And he did. It was like 45 minutes from the time I got out of bed till she was born.
Okay. It's just like it's a lot to take in
Yeah.
because it's just so different from your previous
Yeah.
experience. Like, what?
Yep. Yeah.
Like on her due date or like
Like,
right
the
by
wee
her
hours of the morning on the day after her due date, yep.
Oh my word.
Mhm. Yeah,
45 minutes.
yeah,
What?
yeah, it was I mean, still she's, 3 years old, and I still feel, like, a little still in shock over it
Like
some
what
days.
happened?
Yeah,
I think those inversions worked.
yeah. She was also only 8'4", so she was, like,
Ah,
a lot smaller comparatively, but
mhm,
I think she must have just, yeah, been in a great position, and, I mean,
mhm.
in that, I had, like, pure fetal ejection reflex. Like,
Yeah.
I did not push for a second, and there also isn't a thing in the world that I could have done to
Yeah.
not push.
Yep. Yep.
It's just like a
Oh,
wild thing to experience.
yeah, it
For
really
sure.
is. Gosh,
Yeah.
I bet it's super wild after your 4.5 hour pushing.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. And again, like, I don't see that in the hospital heart
mhm,
like ever. We see people involuntarily pushing, but it's almost always like, okay, hold on, wait until the provider's in the room or whatever. And
mhm,
I've always tried to not say wait as much as I can, but
mhm,
I have a whole new appreciation for like you just can't
mhm,
wait when that's happening.
mhm.
So,
Yep.
yeah,
Wow. Yeah.
I'm glad I got to experience that because I just think it's really neat, honestly, as much as it's wild and,
Mhm.
still blowing my mind. It's neat to like just see what your body can do.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And so when that happened, you said it was like 15 minutes after you talked to your midwife, then this is happening. So she got there relatively soon after the
Yeah,
baby
she
was
was there
born?
like 12 to 15 minutes later. So we had her on speakerphone.
Yeah.
My mom was here, which my mom is a nurse, but she's been like an OR nurse her whole life.
Mhm.
And so she was, and again, like I said, she's had like all C-sections. She had never seen like a normal birth. So she was just like a little shock and awe, of course, for her too. And like trying to like manage my son. And I'm like, Mom, go get the Pitocin. It's in the fridge just in case we need it. And like, whatever. But yeah, so yeah, our midwife actually, I think, well, my mother-in-law showed up actually before the midwife even, and then our midwife got here and her assistant, and yeah, I mean, everything was fine. I mean, after both my, all my births, I kind of feel like I'm going to pass out a little bit initially,
Mhm.
but I think like with my first, it was just because I felt like I pushed for so long and hemorrhaged, and with her, I felt like it was I almost felt very similarly, but I think it was just because it was so fast.
Yep.
And I did not hemorrhage with her, so that was
Oof.
great.
I was wondering about that.
Yeah. I ended up with a second degree with her, which we did not repair,
Mhm.
and which in retrospect, I think I'm grateful for it. I felt like I had a little bit of a longer recovery from that, but I think for my third, I think it helped me, like, just that my letting my tissue, like, heal on its own versus repairing it and everything, so
Mhm.
Yeah. And then that postpartum, like, I mean, I was still nursing my son. So I tandem fed them for 9 months.
Wow.
And I also subsequently pumped. and I fed like almost another baby. So I was like essentially making enough milk for like 3. Yeah. And then 2 is hard though. The transition from 1 to 2 definitely I felt rocked us the
Uh-huh.
whole time. 2 always
Mhm.
felt challenging.
Yep.
And I definitely felt like I experienced a fair amount of like postpartum anxiety and even some like postpartum rage that I didn't anticipate. And in retrospect was like, maybe I should have done even a little bit more for that. Like I never really wanted to entertain the idea of meds
Mhm.
and ultimately think I was okay, but I feel like it took me, I want to say even like I think it was like 15 months postpartum with her when I was like, I feel okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a harder transition and more
Mhm.
anxiety for sure.
Yep. Yeah. I definitely, and it's funny, that's the exact same age gap of my first
Okay.
two.
Yeah.
And it was a really hard transition.
Yeah.
It was tough, but I am curious to hear how that progresses for you with this next
Yeah.
pregnancy as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And so in that I think that I like even after my second, I think I just learned more to like definitely have just kind of progressed down this like more holistic, natural, crunchy, whatever, you want to call it lifestyle. But I think just more learning too. I really feel like so much of our postpartum mental health stuff, I mean, is obviously very real, but I also think it's so rooted in like nutritional deficiencies. And I think that that's huge. And I think that that's something that's not emphasized really in a lot of areas, for sure, not in like mainstream obstetrical care. But I feel like even like I kind of had to realize that and come to that on my own, like not even coming from my like home birth providers necessarily.
Mhm.
I tried to, I think, nourish myself better during pregnancy. And also for like my third pregnancy, one thing I really wanted to do better was like postpartum meal prep. So I like that was all I really asked for. I like set up my own sort of like blessing way
Mhm.
with just the people that were kind of nearest and dearest to me. And I had picked meals that I wanted to make and like sent it out to them and they chose meals and I bought like compostable containers for the freezer and like I mean I still probably could have even done better, but ultimately I feel like we prepped a lot more. I was more intentional about like even just the first like couple weeks like eating more warm nourishing foods.
Mhm.
And I mean, I'm, obviously getting off track a little bit of my story, but I mean, I can get back to my third birth in a minute, but like, I do think it made a difference, especially postpartum, like, especially early postpartum. And I tried to be good about like electrolytes
Mhm.
and, eating warm, nourishing foods and really just nourishing my body. And I think it definitely helped. I felt pretty good the first like 6 weeks. But then, like, from 6 weeks after, I actually felt like I kind of had like a downhill slide. I started getting some like weird like chest pain. Ultimately, kind of the long story short was like I ended up like not having anything physically really going on except I my labs came back that I've always been kind of borderline anemic and I ended up having very low ferritin, which looking back, I'd probably had this even prior to all of my pregnancies, but nobody had ever really delved into it. So postpartum, I ended up getting a couple IV iron infusions, and I think that helped. I am still kind of on a journey of this. Like, I think it's like a life journey of figuring out like, my health and
Mhm.
what that looks like. I am grateful, for how much I've learned and I think can attest to like nutrition. I mean, and just and minerals and electrolytes and all that really making a huge difference for sure. Like I like when I talk to friends having their subsequent babies and stuff, I'm like, work on meal prep. Like, here's some soup, like
Mhm.
here's these things. Like and I even in like it's that for sure I think has impacted my practice and how I take care of patients now. Like, again, I'm in just a mainstream hospital as a labor nurse, and a lot of my patients don't care about that. But I talk to my patients a lot about like fourth trimester and resting and staying in bed as much as you can and
Mhm.
bonding with your baby and nourishing yourself and having minerals, don't just chug water, like have bone broth and coconut water and electrolytes and, try to eat like good nourishing foods. And I don't know how much of it they hear, but I'm for sure bringing it to my, practice. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that's amazing. And for those who are like open to receive it,
Mm,
it would I know it makes a difference. Like
right.
there's no way it doesn't, you know? And
Yeah,
sure not every single person is going to be able to listen and receive, and that's fine. But for
totally.
those who are,
Yeah.
you're giving them what they need.
And really, like, that's like even like where I'm at, like, I'm not working a ton right now, but like where I'm at doing what I do, like, I just am hoping that I'm making a difference for that one or two people. Like, I know that like a
Mhm.
lot of the people that I take care of, they don't want to have us like really physiologic birth. Like,
Mhm.
they don't care that much. But
Mhm.
there's a few people that do,
Yeah.
and I think that that's why I still do what I do. And I still love what I do, even
Mhm.
though it's, very different than my own birth experiences. Like, I feel like I have knowledge that I can bring to them, but I also have like, just support. And I hope that I think I'm making a difference for like a few people along the way. And for that, I'm grateful. And I'll
Ugh,
keep doing what I do, I think, for a while.
that is so amazing.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So, okay, so that your second birth was in, I think you said 2023, January
Yep.
2023?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
And
then what's yeah.
yeah, so we kind of planned like the same, like about 2.5 years or so. And started trying, I think, anticipating that it might take a little bit of time, which it took again like a few months. But yeah, then we got pregnant, and my due date would have lined up again almost with like my first one's birthday. Like I figured, oh,
Ugh.
we'll probably have babies around the same time, which thankfully they were a few weeks apart. But yeah, so I was due in August of 25, and this time I feel pretty good in how I take care of myself. Like, yeah, I feel nauseous, but I know how to mitigate that. Like, I'm gonna eat a lot of protein and
Mhm.
like just kind of get through. So I really didn't see my midwife a lot. I saw
Mhm.
her maybe like, I don't know, maybe like 3 visits for my whole pregnancy. I feel like I've always had some like white coat hypertension. I've
Mm.
never had like, I don't believe it's true hypertension at all. And like, but like I sat down like with my midwife at like my first appointment and just said, I feel like when I think about it too much, I'm gonna have a high blood pressure. So she was like, well, how about we just don't take your blood pressure? And I was like, oh,
Mm.
okay, I love that. Like, sure, let's just not. And she was like, of course, if you start to have symptoms, like, we will. And I was like,
Mhm.
of course I will. Like, but it's those little things that just made me love home birth care 10 times more, because it just is like a conversation about, I mean, truly informed decision making. And
Mhm.
I just feel so passionately about that, because we just need to do it more.
Yeah.
I felt like, yeah, I am declining a lot in just standard obstetrical care, if you will, but I'm doing it because it's coming from a place of really being informed and knowing, like, any risks and knowing alternatives, and like, and also just assuming my own risk.
Mhm.
What a concept, I feel like, that
Yeah,
we are allowed
right?
to do that as people, as patients, whatever. So, I mean, that I didn't do any blood pressures. I also had a lot of really bad headaches, which I did a lot to manage, again, like ice packs and electrolytes and this and that and the other thing, magnesium, everything. But my home birth midwife too was like, if you need a dose of ibuprofen, like here or there, like it's not going to make or break it. Like, because Tylenol just didn't do anything for me, and I didn't really want to
Mhm.
take it anyways. And like, so just little things like that, where I was like, I took probably 2 doses of ibuprofen my whole pregnancy, but it's what I needed at the time. But
Mhm.
I just feel like I wouldn't have done that with, you know, typical care, if you will. So just like little things that I love about home birth care. I also just really like just kind of owned my own care a little bit. Like,
Mhm.
I don't know, yeah, we went through, we were pregnant, and I was, just pregnant and raising little kids. And I mean, we did do an anatomy scan everything was fine. That's kind of like the big thing that we did. And then this time I just was like, if I go late, I go late. That's fine. Like,
Mhm.
granted, this was for sure my most uncomfortable pregnancy, just physically. I mean, I had some like, I don't know, like symphysis pubis pain or whatever it was, like at like 11 weeks
Oof.
this time. Like, and it got a little better and then it got a little worse and,
Mhm.
whatever. So I was pretty uncomfortable by the end. And with this pregnancy too, I just felt like I got so big so fast. And so like
Mhm.
early on in this pregnancy, I was like, this kid's gonna be 10 pounds at least. I'm like, but whatever. I've had an almost 10-pound baby before. I'm not concerned about it. And then though, like I got big so fast and then kind of like just plateaued for a while. So
Mhm.
by the end of this pregnancy, I was like, I don't know. I don't think he's all that big. I felt like I had so much room in my belly. He would move like from one side and the whole other side of my belly would be like empty. And my midwife, even I think around it was like my due date, she was like, I honestly feel like this kid's maybe like 8.5 pounds if I had to say that. And I'm like, okay, fine. So yeah, I backtracking a little bit to my little like blessing way that I kind of just formed my own. One of my friends helped me with it a little bit, but I really wanted like meals and I wanted prayer and I wanted to be really specific about what I prayed for in my birth. I had listened to another podcast like after my first, which was birthing in God's presence, I think. It was one episode that she just talked about being really like specific in our prayers and like God wants us to be specific. Like
Mhm.
we can ask for specific things. So like even with my second pregnancy, I had asked to get pregnant like for a January due date and I did. I just had specific things I was praying for this birth. I was praying that the midwife would make it, but maybe even more importantly that like my photographer would make it because I'd had the same
Mhm.
photographer lined up for it's a photographer we've used for everything. And I grew up knowing her actually, so I know her personally and I've attended 3 out of her 4 births, but also like she did our wedding and all my
Mhm.
maternity shoots and she's never actually made it for a birth though because she couldn't come in the hospital because of COVID, and then she didn't make it for my very precipitous birth. So anyways, I prayed that she'd make it, but I also just prayed that I would be really present. I felt like my other two, like, was I had pushed for so long, or it was such a whirlwind that I just felt really kind of like out of it. And
Mhm.
I just wanted to be really present. And then of course I just prayed that like, all my like anxieties of what could go wrong, that like things just wouldn't.
Mhm.
So we just had like I had a list of these things that I sent out to those that were at this like blessing way and they prayed over me at this blessing way and they all went home with this list and they also went home with a little candle that they could light when they knew I was in labor to just be praying for me. So yeah, it just was those were the things I really cared about this pregnancy and where I had wanted a September baby. So like September 1st came around and I was like, okay, here we are. All right, where's
Nice.
this baby? And of course I had been like a little kind of crampy that morning, which like while I have Braxton Hicks throughout all my pregnancies, I'm never actually like crampy. Like I just have
Mhm.
Braxton Hicks. So like that more like September 1st, I was like a little crampy, but we like went on with our day. It was Labor Day and went to my sister's pool and like everything kind of like fizzled out. But then that night I was like, okay, like to my husband, I was like, you go back to work tomorrow. Like I am gonna have to do this for like another week because like if
Mhm.
I don't have a baby like now, like I'm not gonna go into labor while the kids are like just wild and crazy. And I was like, so I just have to like, you know, buckle up and realize that like I'm in it for another week and I can do that. And I was like 40, that was like 41 weeks at that point. And I was like, all right, I can do this. I think. But then the next morning I woke up at like, I don't know, like 5:30 and kind of felt a little similar to like my daughter where I just was like, I'm a little crampy, but like, I don't know. So
Mhm.
but they definitely felt like stronger and crampier and no consistent pattern, but I also like with this past birth I just felt like it was hard to know when to call the midwife and when things were going to make that transition because of how fast my second one was, but I also didn't want, to sound the alarm too soon. So my sister ended up like offering to take my first two, which I wasn't even sure like if I cared whether they were around or not, but I think that was good. And my husband and I took a little walk up and down the street, and things like pretty quickly started to like get into a pattern. So one they were like every like 3 or 4 minutes, and like so my husband was like, "You should call the midwife." So I texted her at like 9 a.m. Oh, that was the other thing. I prayed for like a 3 to 4 hour labor, which like
Mm.
for anyone else is probably pretty quick, but like for me, I was like, that sounds like a beautiful, lovely time frame. Not too fast, not too slow. So I called her at 9. She was like, okay, I'm coming. Like, I'll be there. And then I called the photographer, and like everyone just showed up, and like I have great like labor pictures. I had my sister ended up dropping my kids off at our neighbors down the road who are like good dear friends of ours now, and like couldn't have been with better people. My mom was here. Just it's like the right people were here. It was like morning time, which my sister's always like, "Who has babies in the middle of the day? But you do." Like, and I'm like, "Yeah, it's kind of nice." Like, I slept pretty well the night before, and then woke up and had like a 3 to 4 hour labor, exactly what I like prayed for. Yeah, ultimately with this one, I didn't want to get in the tub too soon and have things like fizzle out at all. I mean, I tried really hard to like just loosen up and relax with like every contraction, and I think again it was definitely a more intense labor than like my first,
Mm.
but not as like wham bam thank you ma'am as my second. And so like I finally got in the tub I think like at 11, and I could tell like towards the end that I was getting closer, and I could tell like if my water would just break he'd come. But also I was like, I know if my water breaks then he's going to come and it's going to be even more intense. Anyways, I delivered his head in the tub, and I was like, "Okay, his head's out," and the midwife was there, and then like a minute later, she was like, "Okay, I think you need to get out of the tub." So
Mhm.
I climbed out of the tub, which I had thankfully, like, I'd helped many people out of the tub with a head hanging out of them before as a nurse, so it didn't seem that wild to me, but it was a very tall tub, and I'm not very tall, so, like, I got out, he came out right away, which, like,
Mm.
afterwards, my midwife was like, "I don't think it was a shoulder, you just needed more room, like, you just needed to make more space," but also, she told me after that, like, a little loop of his cord came out with his head, so he had, like, a slight little prolapse cord, and he came out and didn't want to do anything for a little while. I had asked my sister to take like a video of his birth because I really wanted like to see his birth, and like he was quite floppy and not interested
Mm.
in coming around. But it's funny, like at the time I was like, he was okay, like he was fine. I
Mhm.
knew he was fine. He ended up perking up just fine, and he was fine. And then he weighed 10.3.
Oh.
So he was just large. He was just so big. And I ended up with like the teeniest little like nick for like a
Mm.
laceration, like nothing. Like
Wow.
which I had spoken to my midwife about previously, that I said like, I had a third with my first, a second degree with my second. Like, do you think that like is there anything I can do to help prevent that? And she was like, honestly, I think the fact that you didn't repair it the last time, I think your tissue healed better, most
Mhm.
likely healed stronger, which I hadn't ever really thought of, but it made sense to me. And like ultimately, I think, it was true. Like
Mm.
I had a 10-pound, 3 ounce baby without really anything. So that was great. And I did really feel really present the whole time. I felt like I just was present for my labor, and even like afterwards I was like, I usually feel like I'm going to pass out, so let's just get right to bed. Like
Yes.
um and then this time with my second, we had ended up ultimately doing Pitocin. I had kind of wanted to wait on it. We ended up doing it. And this time I just like my bleeding was so minimal, and we didn't do Pitocin, which I would have been willing to if I had had to, but I also like just the implications with, possible like increase of postpartum depression or postpartum mood disorders with, Pitocin. I just wanted to not if I didn't have to. And like I didn't. It was
Mhm.
great. And I felt like it was great. I stayed in bed, and again, the things that I'm just like so grateful for with home birth, that I'm like, I just get to be in my own bed with my big giant baby, and and then like our neighbors brought our kids up the street like an hour later, and
Oh.
like it was great. And then, of course, like, he ended up having, like, a little bit of, like, quick breathing, and I hadn't even tested for GBS this time, but I previously have been GBS positive with both of my others and chose to not treat either of those, so this time I knew I wouldn't do anything differently with it, but assumed I'd likely be GBS positive again. And then I think postpartum is where my brain starts to kinda, like, kick into, like, anxiety mode of, like, "Oh, okay," of knowing too much. I'm like, "Okay, well,
Mhm.
if I was any other mom who didn't know all the things I know, I would just look at him and probably think, 'He's fine, he just breathes a little bit quick,'" except, like, my brain just started to, like, go down a rabbit trail, and so at, like, 24 hours, we ended up going to the emergency room just to have everything checked out, which was fine, but it definitely, like, it burst my nice little postpartum bubble a little bit. Like,
Mhm.
I was just feeling so good this time. I felt like I physically felt the best out of any of my,
Mhm.
deliveries, even having had my biggest baby and,
Mhm.
everything, and then had to, like, go sit in an emergency room for, like, 7 hours.
Oof.
And then I was like, "Now I'm sore and I'm tired."
Yeah.
But ultimately, he ended up being fine. Like, that just is another lesson in just, like, trusting, I think, and surrender because, of course, something could have been wrong, and thankfully it wasn't.
Mhm.
But, knowing to I just have to also just trust and surrender my kids to the Lord that, like, if he had been sick, like, that still wouldn't have been outside of, like, God's plan either. So, but yeah, those are my birth stories.
Wow. It's so neat to hear the journey too,
Mm,
just that comfort that came with time and
mhm.
experience and yeah, your ability to relax a little bit more and,
Yeah,
trust your body, trust that things were going well. I mean, going from, doing all of the typical screenings, all the things in the beginning to like we had 3 appointments with your final, like that does show huge change in your
yeah.
perspective.
Yeah, and I think too, just like I mean, I'm never gonna like judge other people's birth stories or how they give birth to their babies, but at the same time, like it's okay for me to be proud of my births. You know what I mean?
Mhm,
Like the whole like, oh, as long as you have a healthy mom, healthy baby, like, yeah, that is the goal, but it also should be like our minimum standard.
mhm,
Like it's okay to also like feel yes, empowered, but and like proud of what our bodies can do, what they're meant to do, what they're designed to do, and to like find the joy in being in my home with the
mhm,
people that I choose to be here and having my kids here. Like I one of my friends just had a baby and my kids the other day were like, "Is she at home?" And I was like, "No, she had a baby in the hospital." And they were like, "What? Like why?" Like even though they know like this is what I do for a
it's
job and
your
like
job,
whatever,
yeah.
but they just were like, why isn't she home already? She had a baby yesterday. What's she doing? Like, so it's just, it's neat to see like how, I'm impacting potentially like
Mhm.
future generations too. Like, you know,
It's a big
so
deal.
I love home birth. And obviously
Mhm,
it is not for everyone and it does not need to be for everybody,
mhm,
but it's okay to, like, I celebrate it. And even like with my coworkers that I work with who like, I'm like, you could have a home birth, like,
mhm,
and I think that, I'm able to put little seeds into
mhm,
friends or whether it's seeds of home birth or just, you know, more physiologic birth or like
mhm.
taking care of yourself postpartum. Like, I'm just grateful for my experiences and not only how they impact me, but also how I can share them, I think, with others too.
Mm. I
Yeah.
love it, Allison. Look at you just walking in your calling, just doing your thing. That
Yeah.
is so beautiful. What is
Yeah.
it like being a mom of 3 now? We heard the transition
Hmm.
from 1 to 2. That was tough, but
Hmm.
2 to 3, how was that?
3 is just delightful, honestly. Like,
Agreed.
I highly encourage all my friends to have 3. I'm like, 2 is hard, guys. I get it. I was there. It's real. But 3 is, I mean, it's real. Like, he's along for the ride. He's the
Mhm,
most delightful baby. And, like, I think just the reality of it is, like, the bigger 2 play well together. And, like, I've
mhm,
said that I snuggled this one more and had more contact naps and more than I did with my second for sure
mhm,
because she had to, like, go in a bassinet or lay down for a nap, or, she hardly ever got put on the floor because she would have been trampled. And like this kid, like, he just, again, he's along for the ride. Like, and he really
Oh.
is like everybody's baby. Like everybody just loves him. And it's great. I love three. I think my,
So
like,
pretty.
ideal world would have been, like, I would have gotten married maybe a little earlier. I thought that, and had kids younger, and, whatever, and would have loved 4, but, like, my husband also was like, 2 feels good. So, like, 3 was a stretch, and I'm not getting any younger, so, like, 3 is probably, like, where we're at, and it's great, and I think I will probably always be the person that wonders of, like, what if we had another? Or like, I love being pregnant, even though it's uncomfortable. Like, that's my favorite body I ever live in, is my pregnant body. I love it. So, I think I'll be sad to likely never do that again. But like, also, I do love our 3. Like, even just the fact of being outnumbered, I kind of love too. Like, it's like a little bit of great chaos. And not that
Yeah.
it's all easy, because it's not by any means, and not, trying to paint that picture. Because I'm still raising a 3-year-old and an almost 6-year-old in the process too, that have their challenges, and we're constantly evolving in how we parent and figuring out the best and the right way to do that. And we will forever, I'm sure. But
Mhm.
um, yeah, 3 is pretty delightful.
Beautiful. Allison, this was so much fun. What a cool story. Just the way everything, how you moved through all of these births. Truly beautiful, very insightful. It was such an honor. Thank you so much for coming on the Happy Home Birth podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited. I've been very excited for this. So, yeah.
Well, it's been a blast.
Agreed.
As we move into this week's episode roundup, there are a few things from Allison's story that really stand out to me. First, I think her story is such a powerful reminder that knowledge does not have to create fear. Allison has spent over 16 years working as a labor and delivery nurse. She's seen complications, she's seen lots of intervention. She knows the hospital system deeply, and yet, rather than moving further away from physiological birth, she moved into it. Sometimes understanding physiology more deeply actually increases trust in the body, not decreases it. In fact, that's almost always how it works. Next, I love the progression we hear across her births. Her first birth held anxiety, timelines, and the pressure of approaching 42 weeks. Her second birth was fast and overwhelming in a completely different way, but by her third birth, we hear a mother who has settled into pregnancy, labor, and trusting herself more thoroughly. I especially loved hearing how specific she became in prayer during that final pregnancy. She prayed for the right people to be there, to be present, and to have peace. And finally, this conversation around postpartum nourishment, it is so important. Allison spoke candidly about postpartum anxiety, depletion, low ferritin, and the connection between nourishment and mental health. The truth is, we cannot separate the physical from the emotional. What happens in the body can impact the emotional and vice versa, which means that rest matters. Minerals, water, warm, nourishing food, it's foundational. And while postpartum struggles are certainly deeply layered, I do think that our culture often overlooks just how depleted mothers become. So I appreciate so much that Allison is bringing this perspective not only into her own life, but even into her hospital work, caring for other women. The little seeds she's planting really matter. All right, my friends, that's all I've got for you for today. I'll see you back here next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Are you looking to extend the home birth support, encouragement, and education? Join us in our Facebook group, Happy Home Birth Podcast Community, and check us out on Instagram at Happy Home Birth Podcast.